Well, now on one of our top stories, the Israeli Prime Minister reportedly backing a plan for the total occupation of Gaza. It comes as calls continue for more aid to be allowed into Gaza, with more starvation deaths reported in the territory. Global Affairs editor Laura Tingle has the details.
The Security Cabinet is basically all now Netanyahu loyalists. All the people who were in place at the time of the October 7 attacks have been sacked or have walked. And so these are all handpicked people of Benjamin Netanyahu. Despite that, we're hearing reports that there is conflict and certainly confusion about whether this is a really good idea or not. Now, the Prime Minister's office has put out a statement in the wake of those meetings saying that the IDF will do whatever the Security Committee has suggested should be done. But that's effectively him, the Chief of the Defence Force, the Defence Minister and a couple of others. And, you know, it's not much of a, it's not like the whole cabinet or anything like that, but I think this shows the extent to which Benjamin Netanyahu is now basically hostage to the far-right members of his government who are insisting on the obliteration of the Palestinians one way or another.
How much of a change of tack is this for Benjamin Netanyahu, though? And is this something of a gamble for him?
I think it's a change of tack and it's a gamble because there's a lot of hostility building up within Israel to what's going on, to the ongoing war, and particularly this proposal to take over all of Gaza. There are three areas that the Israeli Defence Forces don't control, which is only about 25% of Gaza, are these areas where they believe the remaining hostages are kept. And so families of hostages believe that if they go into these areas, it's basically signing a death warrant for those hostages, particularly after some hostages were killed as Israeli Defence Forces approached in other areas.
What would this mean for people on the ground in Gaza, though, if this plan were to go ahead?
Well, you know, the suffering in Gaza has obviously been already unimaginable. There are these three small pockets of the region which have not been affected yet. Presumably this would involve the destruction of those remaining sections and essentially leave the population with absolutely nowhere to go. So even worse, and no sign, despite sort of assurances that the humanitarian situation is improving.
If the level of opposition from within the Israeli public is increasing with news of this reported plan, does that have any influence? Does that have any influence on Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, the analysts in the region are saying not really, because essentially the Prime Minister is in this position where if he leaves, he is vulnerable to court actions. So there's a lot of cynicism that he's basically doing this to preserve his own position. But without a doubt, if he doesn't go ahead with this, it's basically somewhat an admission of failure that the policy of warfare hasn't worked until now.
Onto the humanitarian side in Gaza now, Laura, some aid has been allowed through by Israel. There have been stark warnings, though, from the global spokesperson for UNICEF, that's Australian James Elder, about how much more aid is needed.
Yes, I mean, essentially they're letting in 100 trucks when they need 500 trucks, and we've got those airdrops which are, you know, barely touching the sides of the demands for food, and I think even President Trump is acknowledging that more needs to be done, though he's still sort of staying on the sidelines, if you like, and saying that you know, that the Americans are giving money to Israel to get food in, so he's skirting around the issue.
So this new total occupation of Gaza idea comes amid growing international moves to revive the two-state solution. How do you see all that playing out with the UN meeting, of course, on this next month?
Well, without a doubt, they're trying to maximise the pressure on Israel and on the US by this sort of constant rollout of people coming out in support of the two-state solution. And there's a ceremony or a particular day earmarked at the UN General Assembly on the 23rd of September, where those pledges of support for the recognition of the State of Palestine will take place. Now, the general presumption is that that the US would then veto any move by the UN Security Council to let that through, or any other measures that the Security Council might take in response to that. Now, that's a big call for the US, even given President Trump's dismissal of the United Nations as an institution, given the outrage around the world, for the United States to not sort of support moves to ease the situation in the Gaza Strip and even in the West Bank now, I think is going to require a lot of political capital being eaten up on his part. So I think the question becomes, what does it imply if you actually do recognise a state of Palestine? Most importantly, it requires members of the United Nations to assist and support that state. So that changes the sort of the mechanics of what happens in the region, and it's both Western nations and Arab nations who are behind this push.